I still remember the smell of cheap coffee and stale donuts when I walked into Harrison Developments that Friday evening. 20 years I'd spent building that company from nothing. And now I was being treated like I'd wandered in off the street, looking for spare change. My son called me 3 times that week. "Dad, please wear something nice. Madison's worked really hard on this anniversary event. It's important to her." Each time, I told him the same thing. I'd come straight from the job site. I had a meeting with the contractors about the Richmond property that ran late. No time to go home and change. Number 9. With contractors in the Richmond. That was partly true. I did have a meeting, but I also wanted to see how my son's wife would react when her father-in-law showed up in dusty work boots and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. Call it a test. Call it the stubbornness of an old man who'd grown tired of pretending. The lobby of Harrison Developments gleamed with marble floors and crystal chandeliers I didn't recognize. When did my son approve those renovations? I ran my hand along the reception desk. Solid mahogany. Probably $12,000. The company I'd built had started in a strip mall office with furniture from Goodwill. A young woman, in a black dress and white apron, appeared with a tray of champagne flutes. She looked at my boots, at the dust on my jeans, and her smile faltered. "Sir, the service entrance is around back. Catering staff should have been here an hour ago." "I'm not catering staff," I said. "I'm Robert Morrison, Daniel's father." Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry, Mr. Morrison. I didn't realize. Let me get Daniel for you. Don't bother him. I'll find him myself." The main conference room had been transformed into something out of a magazine spread. White tablecloths, centerpieces with orchids, a string quartet in the corner, playing something classical I didn't know the name of. 200 people milling around in cocktail dresses and suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I recognized maybe 20 of them. The rest were strangers. I spotted Daniel across the room, laughing with a group of men in expensive suits. My son looked good. 35 years old. Full head of dark hair like his mother, wearing a tuxedo that fit him perfectly. He'd grown into a handsome man. I felt a brief swell of pride before remembering why I was here. Madison stood next to him, holding court like a queen at her coronation. My daughter-in-law was a striking woman. I'll give her that. Tall, blonde, the kind of sharp features that photographs well. She wore a red dress that probably cost $5,000 and heels that made her taller than my son. She'd been CEO of Harrison Developments for 6 months, appointed by the board after the previous CEO retired. My son had recommended her, said she was brilliant, visionary, exactly what the company needed. I'd abstained from that vote. The lawyers advised me to stay quiet, let things play out. "You want to see who she really is," my attorney had said. "Give her enough rope. And, look, and this with, when you ever wear formant." I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and started across the room. The crowd parted around me, like I was carrying something contagious. I caught fragments of whispered conversations. "Who is that? Is he lost? Security? Should really check people at the door." Daniel saw me when I was 10 feet away. His smile froze, then melted, then reformed into something that looked painful. "Dad." He stepped forward, putting himself between me and Madison. "You made it. That's great. Really great. That's great. It's really, wouldn't miss it," I said. 30 years is a milestone. Madison turned, her blue eyes sweeping over me from head to toe. The look on her face was like she'd just discovered dog shit on her expensive heels. "Daniel, darling, who is this?" "This is my father, Bob Morrison. Your father." She said it like she was testing the words, making sure she'd heard correctly. "The man who used to run this company? The man who used to run this company? The man who used to run this company?" "The same," I said, extending my hand. She looked at my hand like I was offering her a dead fish. Mr. Morrison. What an unexpected surprise. She looked at my hand. What an unexpected surprise. I called him, Daniel said quickly. I invited him. Yes, I can see that. Madison's smile was sharp enough to cut glass, though I was expecting someone more professionally attired. This is a black tie event, Mr. Morrison. I came from work, I said. Didn't have time to change. Work. She repeated the word slowly. I was under the impression you'd retired. I stay busy, clearly. She gestured to my clothes. My boots. Doing what? Exactly. Manual labor? The group around us had gone quiet. Conversations died mid-sentence. People turned to watch. Sensing blood in the water. I consult on construction projects, I said. Real estate development. That sort of thing. Jone. Relingrang. Relusens. We can minda. Relusens starred. I won be. How quaint. Madison's laugh was like breaking glass. Daniel, you never told me your father was still working with his hands at his age. I thought he was enjoying retirement. In that little house in Riverside. It's a nice house, I said. I'm sure it is. She turned to the group around us, her voice rising. Everyone, I'd like to introduce Daniel's father, Bob Morrison, the original founder of Harrison Developments. As you can see, he's still very much connected to his working-class roots. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd, not genuine amusement, but the kind of forced social nicety that made my stomach turn. Daniel's face had gone red. Madison, Dad worked really hard to build this company. He deserves respect. Daniel's face. Of course he does, darling. She patted Daniel's arm like he was a child who'd said something adorable. And I'm sure he's very proud of how far you've taken things since he stepped down. I mean, look at this event. Look at this building. Look at the quarterly numbers. Harrison Developments has tripled in value under new management. No offense, Mr. Morrison, but your era of mom-and-pop real estate deals is over. We're playing in the big leagues now. I took a sip of champagne. It was expensive stuff. Probably $200 a bottle. Tasted like every other champagne I'd ever had. The numbers are impressive, I agreed. Though I noticed the debt-to-equity ratio has gotten a little steep. Madison's smile tightened. I wouldn't expect someone with your limited background to understand modern corporate finance. We're leveraging opportunities. It's called growth. It's called risk, I said. If the market shifts, you're exposed. The market isn't shifting. Her voice had an edge now. And even if it did, we have multiple revenue streams, diversified assets, strategic partnerships. I've spent months restructuring this company into something that can compete nationally. Your old model of buying strip malls and apartment buildings was never going to scale. Those strip malls and apartment buildings paid for your husband's education, I said quietly. They paid for this company. They paid for the roof over your head. Madison laughed again. Louder this time. Oh my God. You're one of those people. The back-in-my-day types who can't accept that the world has moved on without them. Daniel, darling. Why didn't you warn me? Madison, Daniel said, his voice strained. Maybe we should. Should what? Pretend your father's appearance isn't completely inappropriate? Look at him, Daniel. Look at what he's wearing. This is a professional event, celebrating 30 years of excellence. And he shows up looking like he's here to fix the toilets. The room had gone completely silent now. 200 people watching. Waiting. I think, Madison continued, her voice carrying across the room. This is a perfect example of the generational divide in business. The old guard who built things with sweat and stubbornness. And the new generation who understand that success requires sophistication, education, vision. No disrespect to you, Mr. Morrison. But there's a reason Daniel asked me to take over as CEO, instead of bringing you back. The company needs someone who can navigate modern business realities. Not someone who's stuck in 1985. She turned back to the crowd, raising her champagne glass. But let's give credit where it's due. Bob Morrison started Harrison Developments 30 years ago, with nothing but grit and determination. And now, thanks to Daniel's leadership and my strategic vision, we've transformed his little local operation into a regional powerhouse. So let's have a round of applause for the old foundation that made all of this possible. The applause was scattered, uncomfortable, people clapping, because they didn't know what else to do. I set my champagne glass on a nearby table. Thank you for the kind words, Madison. And congratulations on the growth. I hope it's sustainable. It will be, she said confidently. We're about to close on the Riverside development project. $40 million. The biggest deal in company history. Once that's signed, Harrison Developments will be a completely different animal. Your old company will be unrecognizable. The Riverside project, I said. That's the mixed-use development on 5th and Main. Commercial space, residential units, parking garage. You've been keeping tabs, Madison said, sounding pleased with herself. Yes, exactly. We're buying the land from some old investor who's been sitting on it for years. He's finally ready to sell. Once we develop it, the return will be enormous. Sounds like a smart play, I said. It is. I negotiated the deal myself. The seller was being stubborn about the price, but I convinced the board to meet his terms. Sometimes you have to spend money to make money. A concept that's probably foreign to someone who spent his career pinching pennies. Daniel was staring at the floor. His hands were shaking slightly. He knew. I could see it in his face. He'd figured it out. Well, I said, I won't take up any more of your time. This is your night. After all, congratulations again on 30 years. I turned to leave, and Madison's voice followed me. Mr. Morrison, one more thing. I looked back. That house you're living in. The one in Riverside. The neighborhood's being rezoned for commercial development. You might want to think about selling soon before property values drop. I'd hate to see you lose your nest egg because you waited too long. I'll keep that in mind, I said. I left through the front door. The valet looked confused when I walked past him toward the parking lot. No valet tag, no fancy car to retrieve. I found my Ford F-H-Mui in the back corner. The oldest vehicle in the lot, by 20 years. Dust on the hood. Scratches on the side. A broken tail light I kept meaning to fix. I sat in the cab for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the building I'd built 3 decades ago. The building my son had inherited. The building Madison thought she owned. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Dad, I'm so sorry. Please call me. I didn't respond. Instead, I called my attorney, Robert. James Thornton answered on the second ring. How was the party? Enlightening, I said. I think it's time. You're sure? Once we do this, there's no going back, I'm sure. All right. I'll have the papers drawn up. Board meeting is scheduled for Monday at 9. You want to be there? Wouldn't miss it. I drove home to my little house in Riverside. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, mot. 800 square feet. Built in 1978. I'd bought it 40 years ago for $60,000. Worth maybe $400,000 now, if Madison's rezoning went through. Not much by modern standards, but the house wasn't my retirement plan. Never had been. I spent the weekend ignoring phone calls from Daniel. 12 calls Friday night, 8 on Saturday, 10 on Sunday. Finally, on Sunday evening, he showed up at my door. Dad, please. We need to talk. About what? About Friday night. About Madison. Dad. She didn't mean it. She was nervous. She wanted to impress the investors. She just got carried away. God bareness. About Madison. God bareness. She called me an unsophisticated relic who couldn't understand modern business. She was wrong. I told her that. We had a huge fight after you left. Did you? I stepped aside, letting him into the house. Daniel slumped onto the couch, his head in his hands. She said she was right, that you're stuck in the past. that the company has moved beyond what you built. She said, if I couldn't see that, maybe I wasn't the right person to be COO. She threatened your job? Not directly, but the implication was there. I sat down across from him. My son looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled shirt, like he hadn't slept all weekend. Daniel, let me ask you something. How much of Harrison Developments do you think you own? I own 20%. You gave it to me when you stepped down 5 years ago. And the rest? The board holds 40%. Various investors have another 35%. Madison got 5% as part of her CEO compensation package. So by your math, that adds up to 100%. Yes. Who do you think owns the other 40%? Daniel looked up. What? The math doesn't add up, son. You have 20. The board has 40. Small investors have 35. Madison has 5. That's only 95%. Where's the other 5? I don't know. I assumed it was distributed among silent partners or something. Not quite. I pulled a folder from my desk drawer, handed it to him. Open it. Inside were stock certificates. Harrison Developments, Inc., 60% controlling interest. Registered owner, Riverside Holdings, LLC. Daniel stared at the papers, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Riverside Holdings is my company, I said. Has been for 15 years. When I stepped down from Harrison Developments, I didn't sell my stake. I transferred it to a shell company and stayed quiet. The lawyers structured it so I could observe operations without interfering. The board knows there's a controlling shareholder. But they don't know. It's me. They think Riverside Holdings is some investment firm in Seattle. You own 60% of Harrison Developments? I do. So when Madison said she convinced the board to meet the seller's terms on the Riverside project, she was negotiating with herself. The land she's buying? I own that too. Different shell company. Same result. I've been letting her chase that deal for 6 months, watching her push the company deeper into debt to acquire land I already control. Daniel's face had gone pale. Dad, why? Why would you do this? Because I needed to know, I said. When you married Madison, I had concerns. She was ambitious, aggressive, brilliant, but I wasn't sure if she was building something or just chasing ego. I needed to see what she'd do with real power. And she failed the test. What happens now? Monday morning, there's a board meeting. I'm attending as the majority shareholder of Riverside Holdings. The board will discover who I am. Madison will discover that her biggest deal is actually a circular transaction that benefits no one. And then I'm going to call for a vote of no confidence in her leadership. Daniel stood up, started pacing. Dad, you'll destroy her. You'll destroy her career. She did that herself. When she chose humiliation over respect, she made a mistake, one mistake at one event. And you're going to ruin her? It wasn't one mistake, Daniel. I've been watching the numbers. She's overextended the company, taken on too much debt, made promises to investors she can't keep. The Riverside deal was supposed to save her, make her look like a genius. Without it, the board will see what I see. She's not a visionary. She's a gambler who got lucky a few times. So what? You're taking over again? At 62? Dad, you told me you were done with this. I am done with this. I don't want to run Harrison Developments, but I'm not going to stand by and watch someone destroy what I built while insulting me to my face. Then what do you want? I want your wife to learn humility. I want the board to install leadership that prioritizes stability over flash. And I want you to decide whether you're going to be a man who stands up for his father or a man who hides behind his wife's ambition. Daniel stared at me for a long moment. Then he turned and walked out without another word. Monday morning, I wore a suit, navy blue, tailored, probably 15 years old, but still fit perfectly. I drove the Ford to Harrison Developments, and parked in the executive lot. The security guard looked confused when I walked past him. But he didn't stop me. The security guard, the boardroom was on the 5th floor, mahogany table, leather chairs, abstract art on the walls that probably cost 6 figures. 8 board members were already seated when I arrived. Madison sat at the head of the table, Daniel next to her. My son's face was carefully neutral. Madison looked up when I entered, and her expression cycled through confusion, irritation, and finally, disdain. "Mr. Morrison, this is a closed board meeting. You'll need to leave." "I don't think so," I said, taking a seat at the opposite end of the table. "Excuse me?" James Thornton, my attorney, followed me in with a briefcase. He placed a stack of documents in front of each board member. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is James Thornton. I represent Riverside Holdings, LLC, the majority shareholder of Harrison Developments. This gentleman is Robert Morrison, the principal owner of Riverside Holdings." The room erupted. Board members grabbed the documents, flipping through them. Madison's face drained of color. "This is impossible," she said. "Riverside Holdings is a Seattle investment firm." "Riverside Holdings is a Delaware LLC with a Seattle mailing address," James said. "The actual owner is sitting right here. Mr. Morrison holds 60% of Harrison Developments. He's held it for 15 years. Through various corporate restructurings. Everything is documented and legal." One of the board members, a woman named Patricia Chen, looked at me with dawning recognition. "I have," I said. "Why?" Madison's voice was shrill. "Why hide it? Why pretend to be some washed-up contractor?" "Because I wanted to see what you'd do," I said simply. "I wanted to see if you'd respect the foundation this company was built on, or if you'd tear it down to feed your ego. I've grown this company." Madison slammed her hand on the table. "Revenue is up 30%. We're expanding into new markets. I've done more in 6 months than you did in your last 5 years. You've increased revenue by taking on massive debt," I said. "You've expanded into markets we're not prepared to handle. You've promised investors returns you can't deliver. And you've done it all while treating the people who built this company like garbage. That's not true, isn't it?" I looked around the table. How many people in this room remember when Harrison Developments was 20 employees working out of a strip mall, when we celebrated closing a $2 million deal, when we knew every contractor, every client, every property by name? Several heads nodded. "That company," I continued, "was built on relationships, trust, reputation. Madison's vision is built on leverage and ego. She wants to be a titan of industry, and she's willing to risk everything to get there. The Riverside deal would have changed everything," Madison said desperately. "Once that closed, we'd have the capital too." "The Riverside deal is dead," I said. "I own that land. I own it through another shell company. You've been negotiating with yourself for 6 months. There is no deal." The silence in the room was absolute. Madison's mouth worked soundlessly. Then she found her voice. "You set me up. You deliberately sabotaged my biggest project. I gave you rope," I said. "You chose to hang yourself with it." "Daniel." Madison turned to her husband, her voice pleading. "Daniel, say something. Tell them this is insane. Tell them your father is trying to undermine everything we've built." My son sat perfectly still. Then, slowly, he stood up. "Madison, I think you should resign." "Madison. What?" "Resign as CEO. Effective immediately. We'll give you a severance package, 6 months' salary, a good reference, but you need to step down." "Daniel, you can't be serious. We're married. We're partners." "We're married," Daniel agreed. "But we're not partners. Not in this. Not when you treat my father like garbage. Not when you risk the company on ego plays. Not when you can't admit when you're wrong." "I am not wrong." "Yes," Daniel said quietly. You are. You've been wrong about a lot of things, and I've been wrong to let you. Madison looked around the table, searching for allies. She found none. The board members avoided her gaze. Fine, she said finally, standing up. Fine. You want me gone? I'm gone. But don't come crawling back when this company collapses without me. Don't blame me when you're back to buying trailer parks and strip malls. She grabbed her purse and walked out. The door slammed behind her. Patricia Chen broke the silence. Bob, I have to ask. What now? Are you taking over as CEO again? God, no. I said. I meant what I said. I'm retired. But I'm proposing we bring in a professional management team. People with experience in sustainable growth, not flash and leverage. We restructure the debt, refocus on our core competencies, and build from a position of strength. And the Riverside property? I'll sell it to the company at cost. No profit. The deal will give us the expansion opportunity Madison wanted, but without the debt load. We'll develop it slowly, methodically, the way we should have from the start. The vote was unanimous. Madison was out. A search for a new CEO would begin immediately. Daniel would serve as interim CEO until then. After the meeting, my son walked me to my truck. Dad, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I should have defended you on Friday. I should have told Madison to apologize right there in front of everyone. I was a coward. You were caught in an impossible situation, I said. What happens with Madison and me? That's up to you two. But son, let me give you one piece of advice. Marriage can survive a lot of things. It can't survive contempt. If your wife can't respect where you came from, she'll never respect where you're going. Daniel nodded slowly. She's already filed for divorce, called me from her car, said I betrayed her, chose you over her. Did you? I chose what was right over what was easy. I clapped him on the shoulder. Then, you're gonna be fine. I drove home in my beat-up Ford, past the buildings and properties I'd developed over 40 years. Strip malls and apartment buildings. Television Way, maybe 7. Unsexy. Unglamorous. The kind of real estate that doesn't make headlines. But they were paid for. They were solid. They'd survived 3 recessions, and would survive 3 more. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered, Mr. Morrison. Madison's voice was cold, controlled. I want you to know something. I'm going to rebuild. I'm going to start my own company, and it's going to be bigger than Harrison Developments ever was. And when I do, I'm going to make you regret humiliating me. Madison, I said, I didn't humiliate you. You humiliated yourself. I just gave you enough rope. And that's the Fendos. You're a bitter old man who couldn't stand to see someone younger and smarter surpass his legacy. Maybe, I said. Or maybe, I'm a father who got tired of watching his son's wife tear down everything he built while demanding applause for it. Good luck with your new company. I hope you learned something. I hung up. 3 months later, Daniel filed for divorce. Madison fought it. Tried to claim stake in Harrison Developments through the marriage, but the prenup held. She walked away with nothing but her severance and her ego. 6 months later, Harrison Developments hired a new CEO, a woman named Sandra Torres, who'd spent 20 years at a major development firm. She was methodical, careful, boring in the best possible way. Revenue stayed flat, but debt came down. The company stabilized. A year later, I attended the anniversary event again. This time, I wore a suit. Not because anyone demanded it, but because I wanted to. Daniel gave a speech, thanking the employees, thanking the board, thanking the foundation his father had built. He didn't mention Madison. Neither did anyone else. Afterward, my son and I stood in the parking lot next to my Ford. You ever going to trade this truck in? He asked. Never, I said. It reminds me where I came from. Madison used to say that was your problem. Always looking backward. Your mother used to say the same thing. But you know what? There's nothing wrong with remembering. Nothing wrong with respecting the work that came before. Progress is good, but not when it means forgetting who you are. Daniel nodded. I'm learning that. I'm learning that. Daniel nodded. I'm learning that. Good, I said. Now go back inside. You've got a company to run. I drove home as the sun set, the radio playing old country songs I'd heard 1,000 times. The house in Riverside waited for me, small and modest and paid for. The buildings I'd developed still stood, still generated income, still served their purpose. Madison was right about one thing. I was old-fashioned. I believed in hard work, in respect, in building things that lasted. In a world that worshipped flash and leverage and quarterly earnings, those values seemed outdated. But when the dust settled, when the leverage failed, and the flash faded, what remained were the foundations, the strip malls and apartment buildings, the relationships and reputation, the quiet dignity of work done well, and maybe, just maybe, a son who'd finally learned the difference between growth and grasping, between confidence and contempt, between building something that mattered and building something that merely looked impressive. 3 years later, I sold my controlling stake in Harrison Developments to Daniel for $1. He cried when he signed the papers, said it was too much, that he hadn't earned it. You earned it, I told him. When you stood up for what was right, even though it cost you everything, that's when you earned it. He runs the company now. Does it differently than I did, differently than Madison did. His own way. Revenue is steady. Debt is manageable. Reputation is solid. It'll never be the flashiest company in the industry, but it'll be around in 50 years. That counts for something. As for Madison, I heard she started a consulting firm, advising companies on aggressive growth strategies. Last I checked, 3 of her clients had filed for bankruptcy, but she still believes she was right. Still tells anyone who will listen about the bitter old man who sabotaged her career because he couldn't handle being surpassed. Maybe she's right. Maybe I am bitter. Maybe I am old-fashioned. Maybe I should have let her run Harrison Developments into the ground, chasing unicorns and moonshots. But when I drive past that strip mall where it all started, when I see families living in the apartments I built, when I watch my son make careful, measured decisions that prioritize people over profit margins, I don't feel bitter at all. I feel like I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I built something that lasted. And when someone tried to tear it down while calling me a relic, I reminded them that relics survive for a reason. They're built to last.